that there are, for me, I see 4 factors for why we are living a really rich moment in terms of the number of artists from many cultures that are touring the world, and the opportunity for artists from cultures to support themselves. First, was this idea that people decided to work together. A lot of networks started to be created, and the important thing is, these don't need to be big formal structures. They can start off with just a few people informally meeting in a bar, you know, or going out to dinner once a month and talking about, is there something we can do? So the first was that people started doing this. The organizations I'm going to talk about, if any of them sound interesting to you in your work, come talk to me afterwards. I can give you a contact name and maybe you can, because people are really happy to help. So in Europe, for example, all these different festivals that deal with world music decided it would be very interesting, instead of, again, only being competing with each other, to say maybe we can do some things together, and if we do some things together we can share plane fares, we can share some of the ideas, we can help cut the costs and all of that. So it was called the European Forum of Worldwide Music Festivals. These days, I'm not sure how many festivals they have. It's got to be 70, 80, and it's very successful. It's been going for 20 years. And they not only share information, like one of them goes to an event like this and hears some great new band and goes back and tells the forum, check this out, here's the CD, here's the link, you know, let's make a tour. But they also now, you know, do some developmental projects. They help other festivals around the world. In North America, there's a festival network, for example, that's much more informal. Because many of them in the month of September have a festival, they decided there's 5 or 6 of our festivals. Maybe we can choose a few artists, we can share the plane fare, and therefore they can take a risk for a new artist, you know. A new artist, it costs the same amount in plane fare for an established artist that you know is going to fill a stage as it does for a new artist. If it's, you know, it's plane fares, it's hotels, so they can take more risks. A lot of clubs are making circuits, and this seems especially interesting maybe for Central America. For example, in Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean, they have something called Café Concert, which is, because they don't have big venues for a lot of the music, there are certain bars, certain restaurants, a couple of good venues, that they all want to book interesting artists. And they decided to have an association, and they meet together. They were able to get some money to help for administration. And so they can actually, instead of just one bar on the island saying, oh, I'll put this artist in, they'll say, let's do, you know, 6 of us will commit. We can put together a 2-week tour for this artist, and it makes it work for us financially, and it makes it work for the artist. So there are these interesting ideas when people start working together. In South America, there are so many now. Fora de Eixo is a really interesting one in Brazil. Abrafim is kind of like the European Forum. They have 70 festivals. And again, they're doing the same kind of thing. Ademi, Octavio would talk about, which has been going for 5 years and has how many? 20 festivals. There's one now in West Africa, Bema. There's one in South Africa, Moshito. So that was one factor. People thinking about what can we do together. The second factor was that audiences, when they finally get the chance to hear music from other cultures, very often like it. And there are markets that have developed that are really interested in music from other places, you know? Because people, you know, luckily there are a lot of people in the world who think just because I was born in this spot doesn't mean this is the only culture I want exposure to. And so there is a hunger now for people to hear music that they've heard before, want to hear again, but to hear new music from unexpected places. For example, in very recent years, 2 countries have made a real big effort in sending their music around internationally. One was Colombia, and they can't be more different. And the other was Korea, South Korea, right? Completely different, because the South Koreans are supporting very traditional music, and the Colombians are supporting music, anything, everything, traditional, popular, and whatever. But in just a very few years, because they were being really smart, really focused, they were inviting the right people, they were networking in their own territory, they had some funding. Colombia suddenly, internationally, is a major presence on the world music scene, and South Korea is too. South Korea suddenly, people who go to these festivals, who like this music, everybody knows about it now. So, there are always regions that have been more popular than others because they did it first. You know, like Brazil's been popular for many years, I guess starting with bossa nova. Certain places in Africa and in the USA and Europe. One of the things that's very good about this market and very good for all of you is that as much as the market likes some things they know, they're always wanting something new. And so, in a lot of ways, festivals, programmers are looking for the next thing, you know. And when you've got a market like yours, in some ways, you have some big challenges because there's a lot that hasn't been done before, and you have to create it for the first time. But in a lot of ways, you're very lucky because so many people don't know about the music from these regions, and the music is rich and it has a long history. So maybe the structures are new, but the traditions are old, so it's a perfect region to start doing this organization, to start, you know, to become one of the next big things on the international stage. So the second factor was that basically people heard it and they like what's new. Unlike, you know, pop markets kind of like things that sound a bit like what they already know. Third factor is that governments and ministries and foundations are finally realizing that culture is not only, the culture is not charity. Culture is business. It creates jobs. It's great for the image of a country. I mean, when you think of what reggae did for Jamaica, it was like an ambassador, the music. When you know, so that it's something that's called creative industries, which is looking at culture not only as something that should be supported because of its own value, but to also be able to make the argument that it's smart, it's good business, it creates jobs, and small businesses, which culture tends to be, are always the most flexible, the most adaptable. They respond better in crisis. So the idea that creative industries and linking culture to the economy is very important. And there are some places, like in Berlin, where the culture department is linked to the economic ministry and not its own culture ministry. Isn't that true?
Not exactly. It's directly at the Chancellor's office. So the Minister of Culture is part of the Chancellor's organization.
Right. Okay. So with this creative industries and all of that, a lot of countries have created music export offices, which is basically government funding. It's not the only way to do it, but it helps. Government funding, which is trying to export its creative arts and music to other countries, and they help with tour support, plane fares. They help with going to some of these events, the music market events, you know, WOMEX, Med, South by Southwest, wherever. And, you know, they help bring their artists, their professionals, their labels. So the final, and this is the end of my little section, one is that the fourth factor that really helped, was the music markets, the creation of music markets, which I mean events like this one. I was running WOMEX for a few years. WOMEX started with 200 people, which is very small. And then it grew. When I left, it was 2,800 delegates and 50 groups and 700 companies and whatever. So, you know, things can start small. The important thing is that they need to start. So the music markets have made it much easier for artists to break out. At WOMEX, we had 2,800 delegates my last year. 1,000 of them were programmers and bookers, which means that as an artist, you are never going to be able to play in front of so many possible employers, people who can give you work. And there are many of these markets, and different markets are interested in different music. You need to do research. There's the world music market, where you do not have to be only traditional. If you are, there's a place, but you can be, you know, DJs and electronic, and you can be very avant-garde, you can be popular. There's big room, but there are certain boundaries. APAP is one in New York, which is for mainly North Americans, but a lot of Europeans come, and that's much broader. MEDEM, not anymore really, because they don't do much music. We created one last year in the Indian Ocean for the first time. We're going to have a second one for that region. There's one in Korea that's being created. There's Babel Med. There's South by Southwest. So the music markets have made it a lot easier because it's a place where it really makes sense to try to get a showcase. And you can find out, you know, what the requirements are and what is needed. But the first thing you have to do is research what's the best market for your music. Because if you're doing, let's say, you know, an alternative rock, or if you're a singer-songwriter that's not really using a basis of traditions from one of your cultures, then you don't want a world music one. You might want one of the folk markets, like the Folk Alliance in North America. Or if, you know, if you're doing heavy metal, there are other ones there. So you have to know which ones you're doing, research it, and then, you know, try to figure out how to get funding to do it. But a showcase can really launch a career. And maybe Aurelio, you know, if you want to talk a little later about your feeling about showcases, that would be really interesting. Maybe when we get time, but